So today we're going to talk about watercolour supplies, the all-important materials that you need to practice your craft. Now there will be some supplies that you can get away with in the beginning stage that are less expensive, but my best advice to you is don't buy bulk, buy quality. So get the best quality that you can afford. So let's start with paint. I would suggest that you get 3 primary colours and aim for those 3 primary colours and build on that base of 3 primary colours. So that's a red, a blue and a yellow. So and if you're going to build on that, get a warm and a cool of those colours. You can make every colour in the palette from those 6 primary colours: a warm red, a cool red, a warm yellow, a cool yellow, and a warm blue and a cool blue. You don't really need to have anything else, but if you spent the money on buying just those, you would be investing really well. Now I buy tubes of Winsor & Newton as because they're readily available at my local art supply store, and the Oriolen is a lemon yellow. It's a light lemon yellow. It's very transparent. It's quite a bright, light, cool yellow. Hard to imagine yellow being cool, but it is. Then I go Winsor Red Deep, which is my really warm, so it's heading a bit more into the oranges, so it's a warmer yellow. Or Indian yellow is the other choice. Fairly similar colours, so either of those two is a good yellow to start with. Now with the reds, you could go with a Winsor Red, which is basically like a fire engine red, so it's quite a warm red. Winsor Red is quite a good base red to get you those rich red, really strong reds, fire engine type red, which makes it a warm red. To go for a cool red, alizarin crimson is the one to go for. They're very, very different qualities, and we will get into that more, and we will talk about mixing colours as in future videos. So my 2 reds that you could use as a base is the Winsor Red and the alizarin crimson. The one that I love to have, which is a bit more on the pinky stage, so it's cooler, is the quinacridone magenta, and that's a really, really beautiful colour. I use it a lot. As you can tell, the tube is almost empty almost all the time. So our blues. Cobalt blue is a really good standby, and if you only got one blue, your cobalt blue will stand you in good stead. It's a fairly warm blue. The French ultramarine is your cool blue, so it's going a bit more into the greens, and that is a beautiful colour to have too. Great for seascapes. I don't tend to use it so much in when I'm painting things like flowers and things like that, but really good for seascapes. So it just depends on your subject whether you go out and get some French ultra, but it's the cobalt and the ultra, 2 great blues to have in your palette. The one that I absolutely love and use tubes and tubes of it, I'm afraid, is the, well, I'm not afraid, no, just love it, the Winsor Blue Green shade. It's just a beautiful rich blue, mixes beautifully with the quinacridone magenta to make this most stunning vibrant purple. So yeah, I get to use those 2 a lot. Now some nice additions, apart from your 6 basics, would be a permanent sap green. Now of course you can make green out of red and yellow, of course, but the sap green is great for and you can add more blue to it and add more yellow to it to take it each end of the spectrum, but it's a great standby to have the sap green. So that's a permanent sap green. Have that one on the palette, get to use quite a bit of that in your tube. The other couple to have, and one that I'm missing right here, so there's 3 others of your darks that you could probably benefit from having, and I think I'm out of one of them. Right, here we are. Burnt sienna. is a great dark. Burnt sienna is a lovely dark. It's a really dark brown, and it's really good for mixing with your blues and so on to get a really deep shadow. Payne's Grey also works really well for that. And even though I don't use black straight, Mars Black can be useful at times, but I would avoid the Mars Black unless you really want to do some experimental stuff. So leave it to last, but get either Burnt Sienna and Payne's Grey. They have different qualities, but both of those could be quite useful as your darks. So that's your paints covered. I keep mine in the tubes, all in a little tin here, which keeps them separated. I have little separations, my reds in one section, the blues in another, and the yellows in the middle. Yellows and earth tones go in the middle. Watercolour is activated by water, so you can actually just squeeze it all out into a palette. I have this large palette that I use, and so it's just a matter of taking a little cheap little squirt bottle and wetting down the palette to activate the paint before you begin your day's work, and they're ready to go. They will go store like that for years to come. I've had this palette for a really long time. Got some lovely looks like phthalo, which is very staining, so I'll have to be careful of that one, that I don't stain my lovely jumper. So paintbrushes is our next thing. I have quite the collection here, but there are some that I use all the time, and it's probably these three. Now these three are actually really cheap paintbrushes. They are considered, they're Montmartre Gallery series, and they're considered acrylic brushes. The reason I use them so much is they have a beautiful point. They're rounds with point. They're quite springy, and they hold quite a lot of water. That's the things that you're looking for in a paintbrush. You want to be able to hold a lot of water and get a really nice point on these round ones. This one is a blending brush. It doesn't have a point. Will not do a point, this one. I've had this one for a really long time, and it's a number 10. And I use that for, it holds a lot of water as well, but it's great for blending out. So, and we'll get to more into some of those techniques later on. Now, a mop brush is another essential. If you're doing large areas, you need a big brush. Small areas, like if you're doing a little eye on a little bird, you need a really small brush. But the larger the area, you need a larger brush. Just, you don't want to limit yourself with the little wee brushes trying to do a large area. So, a mop brush for doing great big washes is great. This brush I've had for, it's an old master squirrel brush. I've had this for a really long time. It was very expensive at the time. 20 odd years ago, but still going strong. This one, on the other hand, is a recent addition. It has a point, which is kind of fun, holds a load of water. It wasn't that expensive. I don't expect to last it as long as this one, but I do use this one a fair bit, and it's great for doing loose washes where you don't want to fill the whole page. If I wanted to fill the whole page or doing a whole sky or something like that, I would definitely use this brush. A couple of other little one is your little your fine liner brush, and that can come in handy if you're doing really fine twigs or really fine line details. And I don't use it a lot because my paintings are a little bit but right at the end you might want to use one of those, or if you need a bit more control with not such a long filament, you could use a little short one. So that's your brushes. So you can start with 3 brushes, a number 16, a number 12, and it must be about an 8, I think this one. It's worn out, but anyway, it's around about an 8. Can do a lot with these 3. That does come with a bigger one. So there's a number 24 as well. So that comes in these kits. Buy them 3 at a time or 4 at a time. So it's possible to get brushes on the bargain side. It's also possible to pay a lot of money for brushes. This one, it was a very expensive brush along with this one. Unfortunately, Tully made this one a bit shorter. I still use it though. Naughty dog. Now when it comes to a palette, you may not have one like that. You can just pick up one of these at the discount store and it works quite well. You can squeeze just a little bit of paint in each thing. Doesn't have a very big mixing well, so I would be tempted to pick up like a white plate from a discount store or something like that and use that to mix your paints on. If you are really struggling to purchase the Winsor & Newton, because they can be quite expensive, the Montmartre has not too bad. They're not that transparent, but you will get reasonable sort of results from that for practicing. As such, the paper, what you're working on, if you're going to go bargain, you could go with the Montmartre paper, the watercolour paper. What you want is 300 GSM and it needs to be watercolour. So this one, $12 or $13 for 12 sheets, pretty good value for practicing on. The paper's not too bad. It has a sort of granulated sort of texture. It's okay. It's not brilliant, but it's okay. I've been a big fan of Archer's paper, but it's become very expensive since lockdown. So I've started using this Bohong paper, which is really good, and about half the price of Archer's. So I use that one mostly now, which is really good, and I use this one in all the workshops. I also have a board. Now this is just, I think I bought a cheap frame at some point, and because this backing board is, the glue in these boards are acidic, and if you put them behind your paintings, they'll make the paintings go yellow. So I take them out and either paint them, or this particular one, when I bought it, I didn't realise had not glass but Perspex. So I use Perspex on there, and that protects my artwork from getting the acid from the glues. And I just tape that down, so when you're working wet in wet, you don't have a lot of trouble with buckling paper. The only other thing that you might want to have in your kit would be a couple of pencils, an eraser, of course, a water container that holds lots of clean water, a sketchbook to practice your ideas in. It's not a good idea to do practice on your watercolour paper because it does damage easily. So do your practice in a sketchbook and then transfer your drawing once you're satisfied with it to your watercolour paper. Now, I think that's got it all covered. Of course, don't forget your drink bottle, because you need to make sure you drink plenty of water. And I use to tape the paper to the board. I just use the painter's tape, and that tapes down, peels off without damaging the paper. So that's an important thing to